Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Start with the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjanashalakayam Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Shva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamcham Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नीलाचल निवासाय नित्याय परमात्मने बलभद्र सुभद्राभ्यां जगन्नाथाय ते नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So we are continuing the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So in the 13th chapter, Arjuna is asking this question about 6 things: Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam and Gayam. And Krishna is answering them one by one. So we have seen the description of 4 of them: Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam and Gayam. And Krishna is here to describe this Prakriti and Purusha. So this is predominantly Jnana Yoga, starting from chapter 13 to the end of the Gita, 13 to 18. So the entire Bhagavad Gita, there are 18 chapters. The first 6 chapters are predominantly Karma Yoga, and enumeration of different kinds of yogic methods: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Sankhya, Niskam Karma Yoga, Karma Sannyas, Ashtanga Yoga, like that. So then in the middle 6 chapters, 7 to 12, Krishna elaborates more on Bhakti Yoga. And the last 6 chapters, from 13 to 18, is predominantly Jnana Yoga. So the structure of Bhagavad Gita is Karma in the beginning, and then Bhakti in the middle, and then Jnana Yoga. So this Karma and Jnana, they are supporting Bhakti, like that. So all this knowledge, this will be helpful for us to cultivate this devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So just to do a recap, what is this 4 things? Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam and Gayam. Let's recap the verses. So first Arjuna is asking these 6 questions. And the Supreme Personality of God is saying, this body is called the field. One who knows this body is called the knower of the field. So the Kshetra is the body. And the Kshetragya, there are 2 Kshetragyas in this body. One is the Jivatma, another is the Paramatma. You should understand that I am also the knower in the bodies. So Krishna told, knower of the body means the soul is the Kshetragya. And Krishna told, I am also Kshetragya. So in the body of living entity, which is Kshetra, there are 2 Kshetragyas. One is the living entity and another is the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Living Entity. And to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. And what is Jnanam? Jnanam is to understand the interaction of this Kshetra and Kshetragya, means body, the spirit soul, and the Paramatma. Now please hear my brief description of the field of the activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what its influences are. So Krishna is elaborating on that. That knowledge of the field of activities and the knower of the activities is described by various sages in Vedic writings. It is especially presented in the Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. The five great elements false ego, intelligence, unmanifested, 10 senses, mind, five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. So these are the different ingredients of the material body. There's five elements, and the elements of the subtle body like mind, intelligence, false ego, and many other things. They constitute the field of activities or the kshetra. And kshetragya means the living entity and the paramatma. And now Krishna is explaining what is jnanam. One explanation of the jnanam is to know about the interaction of kshetra and kshetragya. That is jnanam, already described. Another definition of jnanam is this: cultivation of all these positive qualities. Different positive qualities are mentioned here: humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, enunciation of the object of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness, and pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unaware devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these things I declare to be knowledge, and beside this, whatever there may be is ignorance, or the opposite qualities of this. Cultivation of those qualities is called ignorance. So, that is another definition of knowledge. So, kshetra, kshetragya, and knowledge is explained. And now, Gyam, the object of knowledge. I shall now explain the knowable or the object of knowledge, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman. The spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So there are two Gyam also. One is the spirit soul, the spirit beginningless and subordinate to me. So Anadi Matpara Brahma means Krishna is speaking about the spirit soul. The spirit soul is also Brahma. Brahma means spiritual or Satchidananda. And it is Anadi, there is no beginning of the spirit soul. The spirit soul is eternally existing. And Matparam means subordinate to me. So the spirit soul is Gyam and also the super soul. Now, in the next verse, Krishna says, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, hands and faces. So he is uh, pervading everything and he is everywhere. So this must be the super soul, because the spirit soul is localized within a body, but the super soul is unlimited and pervading everywhere. So the super soul and the spirit soul, they are Gyam also. We have seen these two things, they are Kshetragya and they are Gyam also. The super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the mode of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. So, more description about this Paramatma or Gyam. The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and non moving, because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of material senses to see or know. Although far, far away, he is near to all. So, this Paramatma is right within our heart, within this material body. There are Jivatma also, Paramatma also. So Paramatma or the Super Soul is very near to us. At the same time, he is very far. In the Golok Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, there is the form of the Supreme Lord. So that form is very far from us. But there is another form of the Super Soul which is very near. So this is how this Gyam of the object of Super Soul is being explained in verse number 13 to 19. Okay. So description of that Super Soul is continuing. Although the Super Soul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge, he is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So here we are seeing that the Paramatma is the object of knowledge. And Jivatma is also, because Jivatma is a part and parcel of the Paramatma. So basically, Gyam or the object of knowledge is two things. One is self-realization, another is God realization. God realization is knowing the Paramatma, and self-realization means knowing the spirit soul or the living entity. Knowing that the spirit soul is eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and the spirit soul is Tatastha Shakti, one of the energies of the Supreme Lord. The super soul is Shaktiman, and the living entity, the spirit soul, is Shakti. So to understand all these things, these are called Gyam. Thus, in the field of activities or the body, knowledge and knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain my nature. So this understanding is also crucial to attain Krishna. All these things, Gyam, Jnanam, Kshetra, Kshetragya, and Purusha and Prakriti. So we already discussed that the essence of these chapters, like Jnana Yoga, mainly this chapter 13, is to understand the interaction between Jiva, Ishvara, and Prakriti. And the title of this chapter is also the nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. So we have to keep in mind that there are three things: Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti, three different tattvas. And in the entire Bhagavad Gita, there are 5 subject matters which are discussed. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, Karma. Ishvara means the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul. Jiva means the Spirit Soul, the living entity. Prakriti means the material nature. So Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti. And Kal and Karma. Kal means the time factor, and Karma means the fruity baggage of the living entity. And according to this fruity baggage, law of karma acts and it gives different results, happiness or distress to the living entity. So out of these 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita, these 3 topics are very described in great detail. This Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. So how these 3 things work? Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. So Jiva or the living entity is desiring something. It can only desire. Okay, in this material world, the living entity comes to the material world and tries to enjoy the material world with its senses. So the living entity cannot do anything, but it can only desire that I want to do this. Then the Supreme Lord, as Super Soul, sanctions that activity. Sometimes the Supreme Lord sanctions, sometimes the Supreme Lord will not sanction. And based on that, the material nature will execute. Whatever we try to do, every activity like walking, talking, anything we do in this material world, the jiva can only desire simply to move our body also. If you want to move our body from one place to another, we as the living entity, the spirit soul, we can only desire. And the Supreme Lord, as Super Soul, he will sanction. Okay, I sanction this desire of the living entity that he wants to move the body from one place to another. And the material nature controls my body, and material nature moves my body in such a way that I can move from one place to another. So this simple formula we have to keep in mind, that the jiva desires, the Paramatma sanctions, and the material nature executes. These are the roles of these 3 tattvas, jiva, Ishvara, and Prakriti. Jiva can only desire. Jiva cannot move the body because the Jiva is the spirit soul, Satchidananda, spiritual in nature. And the body we are having, it is material in nature. So there is no connection. The soul is spiritual and the body is material. They are in different dimensions. So the spirit soul cannot move the body. Spirit soul can only desire. That is the importance of Paramatma in our body. If Paramatma is not there in our body, we cannot do anything. Even if you want to move our body, we cannot move our body. So to do anything, we need Paramatma. So therefore, the Jiva can only desire, then Paramatma will sanction that desire, and Paramatma orders the material nature that make arrangement so that the desire of the Jiva is fulfilled. And then material nature moves our body and fulfills our desires like that. So that is the essence of interaction between Ishvara, Jiva and Prakriti. And we are going to discuss that now from verse number 20 to 35. The Purusha and Prakriti, these two topics are described, and also the vision of knowledge. One who has this knowledge, what will be the vision of such a person, a pure devotee? So let's start. Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Vidyanadi Ubhavapi Vikramascha Gunamschaiva Vidhi Prakriti Shambhavan. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformation and the modes of matter are produced of material nature. So material nature means the Prakriti, and the living entities is called Purusha. So this Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, the word Purusha also has two meanings. The Purusha can also mean the living entity, and the Purusha can also mean the supreme living entity or the super soul. So the word Purusha means enjoyer. So when the living entity comes to this material world, it tries to enjoy the material world by using the senses. So because of this mentality, the living entity is called Purusha. There is an interesting thing here. This Purusha does not mean male. Okay, sometimes we think the Purusha means male and Stri means female, but that's not the fact. Purusha in the Vedic scriptures is a synonym of enjoyer. And because the Supreme Lord is only the Supreme Enjoyer, only the Supreme Lord can be called Purusha. Okay, in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, we have seen that the Supreme Lord is the ultimate enjoyer. Bhuktaram Yagyatapasham Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Shuhridam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatmamam Shantimichati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all the living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So the Supreme Lord is the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities. Everything is being done for the Supreme Lord in this material world also. Even in the spiritual world, that must be the case. There are 1,000 Lakshmis who are serving the Supreme Lord, and everything is like everyone in the spiritual world is serving the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the original Purusha. But then why the living entity is called Purusha? The living entity is called Purusha because of the Purusha Abhiman. The living entity is having the mood of enjoyer, but it is not actually the enjoyer. Actually, we all living entities, we are the energies of the Supreme Lord. So this Purusha and Prakriti, it actually means Shakti and Shaktiman. Purusha means the Shakti and Prakriti means the energy of the energetic. That is also another meaning. So Prakriti also means material nature. Why? Because this material nature is also energy of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is having different kinds of energies like the Antaranga Shakti or the internal potency, Bahiranga Shakti or the external potency, and the marginal or the Tatastha Shakti or the marginal potency. So Antaranga Shakti of the Lord or the internal potency is Srimati Radharani. Bahiranga Shakti or the external potency is Durga Devi. And that Durga Devi represents this material nature. So this material nature is also one energy of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it is called Prakriti. So whenever we hear this term Prakriti, that means it corresponds to some energy. Prakriti means energy. Okay, energy of the Supreme Lord. That is the broader meaning. And here Prakriti means the Bahiranga Shakti or the material nature. That also we can understand, because we are staying in the material world. So we are not talking about the internal potency. And this Purusha or the living entity is called Purusha because of the mood of enjoyment. But it is not actually the Purusha. The actual Purusha is the Supreme Lord. But the living entity is Purusha because of the mood of enjoyment. Then what is the actual identity of the living entity? The living entity is also energy of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Tatastha Shakti of the Supreme Lord. So because the living entity is energy of the Supreme Lord, Tatastha Shakti, therefore all the living entities, they are also Prakriti in nature. But they are called Purusha because although the living entity is Prakriti, it does not think that I am Prakriti. It thinks I am Purusha. So because the living entity thinks itself Purusha, it has been addressed as Purusha, but the actual identity of the living entity is Prakriti. So this is a very interesting concept we have to understand. So male or female, everyone in this world, they are Prakriti. It's not the like the male living entities, they are Purusha, and the female living entities, they are Prakriti. No. Both male and female, they are the energies of the Supreme Lord. Because both male or female are soul. And soul is part and parcel of Krishna, energy of Krishna. So therefore, both male and female, they are actually Prakriti. But both of them thinks that I am Purusha. The male also thinks I am Purusha. I have come to enjoy. The female, they also think I am Purusha. Because the female living entity is also trying to enjoy in this material world. Nobody is trying to serve the Supreme Lord here after coming to this material world. Everyone is trying to enjoy. And as long as the enjoying mentality is there, this is Purusha mentality. Means I am trying to take the position of the Supreme Lord, enjoyer. The position of the living entity is to serve the Supreme Lord. But nobody is doing that in this material world. Everybody is trying to take up the position of Krishna, the supreme enjoyer. Everyone is trying to enjoy. Everyone thinks I will be the boss and everyone should become my servant. That is the mode. And that is the contamination. As long as that mentality is there, we will rot in this material world. And when we understand our actual nature, that we are eternal servant of Krishna, by the blessings of the Vaishnavas, or by some Sukriti, I get that intelligence, then I can understand that I am actually the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. And I try to serve the Supreme Lord and the Vaishnavas. When I cultivate this service attitude from the boss-like attitude, then my destination changes. And when I become a pure devotee, I will go back to the spiritual world. So that is the explanation of Purusha and Prakriti. So in summary, Purusha is the living entity and also the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord is actual Purusha. Living entity, although Prakriti is thinking himself to be Purusha. And Prakriti means the energy of the Supreme Lord. There are different energies of the Supreme Lord. Antaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti, and Tadastha Shakti. Here we will understand this Prakriti means material nature or Bahiranga Shakti. Okay. So the material nature is Prakriti, whatever we are seeing. And what is the nature of this Prakriti? This Prakriti sometimes get manifested and sometimes gets unmanifested. Okay. So if we see the Goloka chart, this is the material world. And this material universe is manifested from the body of Mahavishnu, the bodily pores of Mahavishnu. Infinite universes are manifested. Okay. And when Mahavishnu exhales, all these are manifested. When Mahavishnu inhales, everything goes back into the body of Mahavishnu. Then there is a silence for 311 trillion years, 40 billion years. And then again Mahavishnu exhales and all these material universes are manifested. This stays for 311 trillion years, 40 billion years, and again goes back to the body of Mahavishnu. So this is how the material world or the material nature is sometimes manifested and sometimes unmanifested. So this is how periodically this Prakriti or the Jada Prakriti or the material nature is being manifested or unmanifested. Krishna says there is another nature of me that is present in the spiritual world. The spiritual world is never subjected to this periodic annihilation and creation. Spiritual world always stays the same. But this material nature is sometimes manifested and sometimes unmanifested. So in the 8th chapter, we have seen that. Parastasmatu bhavanyo vyaktyo vyaktat sanatanaha yasha sarveshu bhuteshu nashatsu na vinashati. Yet there is another unmanifest nature which is eternal and transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. So Krishna says, this manifested and unmanifested matter means the material energy or the material nature. So above that, yet there is another unmanifested nature which is eternal and transcendental to this material nature. That means Krishna is speaking about the spiritual energy in the spiritual world, Antaranga Shakti. It is supreme and is never annihilated. The spiritual world is never annihilated. Okay. So that is being spoken here. So material nature or Prakriti is temporary. Sometimes it is manifested, sometimes not. And the living entities, what is the nature of the living entities or the Purusha or the Prakriti or the Tatastha Prakriti who is having Purusha Abhiman. That is the definition of living entity. It is actually Tatastha Prakriti of the Lord, but it is having Purusha Abhiman. It is understood to be beginningless. The living entity is beginningless because it is part and parcel of Krishna. It is also beginningless. Krishna is also beginningless. How can we understand? Just like the sun and the sun rays. The sun, although sun is a material object and it has some beginning, but the Supreme Lord is not a material object, and therefore the Supreme Lord is eternal. So suppose for a few moments think the sun is eternal. Although the sun is in the material world, it has a beginning date. Suppose the sun is eternal, okay? Then if the sun is eternal, then the sun rays are also eternal. So whenever there is sun, there will be sun rays. So similarly, whenever there is the Supreme Lord, the living entities are like the rays of the Supreme Lord. So as sun and sun rays both coexist. Similarly, the Supreme Lord and the living entities, they are coexisting. And because the Supreme Lord is eternal, the living entities are also eternal. And this is explained. This is also explained before. See, all the different concepts are coming again and again. Bhagavad Gita 2.12, Krishna has already spoken. Never there was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So, always Krishna existed, always you means Arjuna. Arjuna, you also existed always, nor all these kings. This is a twisted statement we have to understand. Never was there a time when I did not exist. That means I existed always. Similar thing goes for you existed always. All these kings existed always. Nor in future shall any of us cease to be. We will keep on existing. I will keep on existing. You will keep on existing. All these kings will keep on existing. So that is the meaning. And this means the living entities are also eternal. This you and the kings refer to the living entities. Arjuna and all other kings, they are living entities. They are also eternal. And I means Krishna. Krishna is also eternal. Okay. So that is the nature of, and that is the explanation of Prakriti and Purusha. Two tattvas, briefly we have discussed. And their transformation and the modes of matter are produced of products of material nature. And this material nature or Jada Prakriti is having three different modes: Sattva, Raja, Tama, the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Karya Karana Kartritve Hetu Prakriti Ruchate Purusha Sukha Dukkhanam bhuktirtve heturuchyate. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyment in this world. Very important to understand. The nature or the material nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effect. Whatever is happening in this material world, the immediate cause is the material nature. So how to understand? Whatever is happening in this material world, suppose the seasons are changing, automatically rain is coming, and automatically sun is rising, sun is setting, the earth is rotating. Okay, so things like that. Everything is happening, the entire universe is running like that, and everything is happening automatically. So if we try to investigate how everything is functioning, uh, we will see that the material world is functioning automatically, and therefore we will say the cause is nature, material nature. Nature is automatically functioning and nature is the cause. So nature is the immediate cause, but actually the ultimate cause is the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is like a programmer or software engineer who has written this software called material nature, and this is a autonomous software. So the Supreme Lord is the actual cause. Supreme Lord is the creator of this nature. Supreme Lord is energetic, and this material nature is one of his energies. And this material nature is working in an autonomous fashion. So if we try to investigate the cause of these material activities, we will see the nature is the cause. But actually, nature is not the cause. Behind this nature, there is the Supreme Lord. What is the proof? Again, Bhagavad Gita 9.10. Krishna has already spoken about this. Although the Prakriti is functioning automatically, Mayadhyakshena Prakriti, Shuyate Shasharacharam, Hetunanena Kvanteya Jagat Viparivartate. This material nature, which is one of my energies, see, very clearly Krishna is telling, is working under my direction. It seems to be working in an autonomous way, but it is actually working under my direction. O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving things. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So material world is explained in the 9th chapter already. Whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyment in this world. So material nature is only doing the activities, material activities. But it's not like material nature is the cause of my sufferings and enjoyment in this world. Although material nature is executing everything, but it is not the cause of my sufferings and enjoyment. Why? Because it was the desire of the living entity to do a particular karma, and as a result of that karma, these sufferings and enjoyments are produced. So the living entity is always having this choice, Maya or Krishna. If the living entity chooses Maya, it will be happy. If it choose, if the living entity chooses Krishna, it will be happy. And if it is choosing Maya, then it will be in suffering. So it is the decision, conscious decision of the living entity. Material nature is only the executor. We cannot blame. The material world has given me suffering and distress. So just like suppose in our life, some sufferings and some enjoyment is coming. It is not given by the nature. Sometimes we blame the Supreme Lord or the nature. Oh God, why you are giving me suffering too much? So the God is not doing anything. Unless one is a devotee, God will not interfere in your life. Then we say, okay, if God is not giving me, then maybe the nature is the cause. Oh nature, why you are giving me this suffering and enjoyment? Nature is also not the cause. Nature is only executing your desires. Somewhere in the past you have done some karma and consciously you wanted to do that karma. Okay, Paramatma sanctioned that you want to do. Okay, I sanction. You can try this and see. Paramatma sanctioned my desire and material nature executed. And for that karma, I am getting the reaction now. So nobody is responsible for my sufferings and enjoyment. Not Ishvara, not Prakriti. But the Jiva is only responsible for its sufferings and enjoyment in this world. Now, there may be one question that although if I want to do some bad activity, bad karma, why the Supreme Lord is sanctioning? If the Supreme Lord, uh, if the Supreme Lord is will not sanction, then material nature will not execute, and I will not receive the karmic reactions. Why the Supreme Lord is sanctioning? So the Supreme Lord as Paramatma has given us some independence. Although the Paramatma is always wanting that the living entity should come back to the spiritual world by practicing Bhakti Yoga. That is the essence of Gita. We have seen Krishna is trying to convince Arjuna again and again and clear the confusions. So Paramatma always wants the living entity should come back to this to the Supreme Lord by practicing Bhakti Yoga. But if the living entity desires to do something which is not aligned with Krishna and it is Maya, activities in illusion, then also the Supreme Lord allows that activity. Why? Because the Supreme Lord will not force. It will not force that no, you will only do Bhakti Yoga. And when you want to do Bhakti Yoga, then only I will sanction. I will not sanction any other desire. Then it is very forceful and this is not good. So the Supreme Lord sanctions everything as per our karma. If we have sufficient karma, then the Supreme Lord will sanction everything. Supreme Lord gives us the opportunity to try out everything in this world. And He wants us to see that you try out everything and you see whether you become happy or not. Then the living entity tries out so many different ways to become happy. And finally, after many, many lifetimes, it understands that no, all these activities are useless. I cannot become happy by all these activities. Only by devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, I can become happy. Then the Supreme Lord spontaneously comes back to the Super Soul. And Super Soul wants this spontaneous comeback. Not like, no, I will not allow you to do any other activity except Bhakti Yoga. Then that is force. By force, we cannot do anything. We cannot like force someone to love us. That's the point of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, the Supreme Lord is allowing us. Whatever we desire, the Supreme Lord will allow. If we have sufficient karma. If we do not have sufficient karma, then we have to wait. Suppose I want to go to Swargaloka and enjoy. I want now, but the Supreme Lord will not allow because I do not have sufficient karma. The Supreme Lord will say that, okay, I have noted down your desire. You keep on doing this pious activity or accumulate pious activities or punya. Once you are qualified, I will grant your desire. But Supreme Lord notes down everything, and in due course, when we have sufficient karma, He will sanction that desire. And He will sanction every desire. Whether it is aligned with bhakti or not, He will sanction because He will give us the independence to try out everything. That is the reason. Okay, so up to this verse number 26, these two topics we will cover. So living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyment in this world. So concept in this chapter, they are very, very important. So therefore we are taking time to understand this Purusha, Prakriti and interactions. The living entity in the material nature thus follows the ways of life. The ways of life it wants, different ways of life. Not only Vaishnava way of life, even our Vaishnava, non-Vaishnava way of life also, it sometimes goes through that kind of life. And the Supreme Lord, as Paramatma, will sanction every kind of desire, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with the material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. Purusha prakritichtho hi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangasya sadasat janmajo nishu. So, Purusha prakritichtho hi, the living entity within this material nature or prakriti, bhunkte prakriti jan gunan, is getting different reactions due to the interaction of the modes. Sometimes the living entity is acting in mode of goodness. Sometimes the living entity acting in mode of passion, sometimes in mode of ignorance. And according to different kinds of activities, it is receiving different kinds of reactions. Suppose the living entity sometimes worked in mode of ignorance. The result will be not so good because it is mode of ignorance. And when the living entity acts in mode of goodness, the result will be happiness. So similarly, the living entity is doing so many different activities in different modes, and accordingly it is getting results. Karanam guna sangasya sadasat janma jonishu. And what kind of results? It is getting different kinds of births. Suppose a living entity is predominantly in mode of goodness in a lifetime. In the next lifetime, it will become a devata in the Swarga, demigod. If the living entity is predominantly in mode of ignorance, we will explore in detail what are these characteristics of different modes in chapter 14, the next chapter, chapter 17, 18. These three modes of material nature is again a very important concept that we will discuss. So if someone is predominantly mode of goodness, it will go to the upper planetary systems. Urdham gacchati satyastha madhye tishtati rajasa jaghanna gunaveddistha adhogachanti tamasha. If it is in mode of ignorance, it will glide down to subhuman species, animals, or worms, insects like that. So it is getting different kinds of bodies, it is getting different kinds of results. And what is the reason? Karanam guna sangasya. Because of its different activities associating with different modes of material nature. Okay, so that is the meaning of these are the activities of the spirit soul or the Jivatma. And what are the characteristics of Paramatma? The sanctioner, Upadrashta Anumanta cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara Paramatma iti chapyukto Deheshvin Purusha Param. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer. He is also enjoyer, Purusha, but he is transcendental enjoyer. Who is this Purusha? This Purusha is the Supreme Purusha or the Super Soul, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as Super Soul. The Super Soul is the transcendental enjoyer and stays within the body. And there are two functions of the Super Soul. One is overseer, another is permitter. This permitter is, we are calling this sanctioner. So throughout we are discussing that the Jiva desires and the Paramatma sanctions, and that is Paramatma permits, permitter. And what is the meaning of overseer? As overseer, Paramatma is seeing everything, all the different activities we are doing. Paramatma is seeing that, okay, I am trying to enjoy this world with my senses. I am trying so many different things. I am trying to get happiness from different objects of this world, different persons of this world. Paramatma knows that I will be devastated in my attempts, but Paramatma is waiting patiently when I will come back to Paramatma. Because Paramatma knows very well there is no other way to get happiness in this material world until I come back to Paramatma. Still, the Paramatma is patiently waiting and seeing the living entity how it tries to enjoy in this material world. Okay, so that is the overseer. Paramatma sees and keeps track of every activity of the living entity. We may think that nobody is seeing me now. I am doing a certain kind of activity, but Paramatma is always seeing. यो ये बम वेत्ति पुरुषं प्रकृतिं च गुणैषः सर्वतो वर्त्मनोऽपि न स भूय vijayate. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation, because this is a very crucial knowledge. One who understands this knowledge will understand the tattva, the super soul, in great detail. You will have the humility, oh, I am insignificant living entity. I cannot do anything without Paramatma. I can only desire. And it is the Paramatma who is sanctioning. So this is called actual knowledge. And people in this material world, they are ahankara bimud atmas. They do not know who is the doer. They think I am doing everything. Everything is due to my hard work. So this kind of living entities in this world, they are arrogant. And actually, when the living entity understand all these things, he becomes humble and he becomes surrender unto Paramatma. And therefore, he will attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. ध्यानेनात्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिदात्मनमात्मना अन्ये संख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन च परे. Some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge. So meditation means dhyana yoga, cultivation of knowledge means jnana yoga, and still others through working without fruitive desires, karma yoga. So Krishna is again telling this Paramatma can be achieved by karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, different methods also. But we have seen Krishna will say this, that there are so many different ways, but they are not feasible. Jnana yoga is not a very good way. In 12th chapter, we have seen Krishna has spoken, Kleshu adhikataras tesham abhyakta asakta chetasam. Krishna is telling there is a way. By Jnana Yoga also you can attain Paramatma. But Krishna has also described the way is not very good. The way is full of thorns. It is very painful way. And what about Ashtanga Yoga? Ashtanga Yoga is impossible for people in Kali Yuga if you read the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So although Krishna says there are ways, we are not qualified to walk on those ways. So then what we should do? Only remaining is Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is possible for people in Kali Yuga. And when this Karma Yoga is purified, it becomes Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is the precursor of Bhakti Yoga. So only Karma and Bhakti is allowed. Although there are other ways existing, but they are almost similar to non-existing because we cannot walk on those paths. Like Jnana or Ashtanga Yoga is not possible for us. Anye tvat evam ajanantam shrutva nevya upashate tepi Chatitaranteva mrityum shruti parayanaham. Again, there are who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others because of their tendency to hear from authorities. This is Bhakti Yoga and accepting a guru. They also transcend the path of birth and death. So some people they try to attain Paramatma through Jnana Yoga. Some people try to attain through Ashtanga Yoga, some by Karma, and some by hearing from the authorities and acting according to their instruction, which means accept a Guru and follow his instructions, which Krishna has described before also, 4.34. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So this is how there are different ways to attain Paramatma. But when we read the entire Bhagavad Gita, we know, although Krishna says there are different ways existing, Krishna's recommendation is follow Bhakti Yoga. That will be the easiest. And by that, you can know Paramatma to the fullest extent. By Jnana Yoga, you can know Paramatma up to Brahma Jyoti. By Ashtanga Yoga, you can know Paramatma till the feature of Paramatma. By Bhakti Yoga, we can know the absolute truth in its original form, Satchidananda form. The Swayam Bhagavan feature can be known by Bhakti Yoga. So this is how we have covered these remaining two topics also, Purusha and Prakriti. And then there is a last chapter, last section of this chapter, which talks about vision in knowledge, vision of a pure devotee who is in complete knowledge of all these things. So we'll discuss that in the next class. So if there is any questions, we can take. No questions? Okay. So then we'll meet again next week and we'll continue that remaining section. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.